I've had my gripes with the mainstream media. It's a large part of the reason why I cover the Miami Heat on this channel as much as I do. Not only because they're my favorite team, but simply because even though they're the first seed this season and they're a large market team, they've gotten zero to no media coverage this season. And they're not the only team that's basically been done like this. The Milwaukee Bucks are returning champions this season. They've been without Brook Lopez for majority of the year, and they still managed to get the third seed, tied for the second seed, yet very little media coverage. The MVP in Nikola Jokic was going crazy this season. You almost never hear his name on First Take. And it's really a disservice to the common fan who doesn't get to watch basketball as much as, well, the entire season. So they go to ESPN or those channels to find out exactly what's going on in the sport. And if you listen to those guys, you think the Los Angeles Lakers and the Brooklyn Nets were running the entire NBA because that's all they talk about. So today, we're going to talk about why the media needs to be stopped and we need to hold them accountable for the misinformation or the lack of information given to the common fan, and why this is a problem for the sport. ESPN is one of the largest sports media companies in the world with one of the largest sports media shows in the world, that being First Take. The show hosted by none other than Stephen A. Smith, who brings in about 445,000 average viewers per episode. Now, with a fan base that large, you'd expect a show like this to not only be very credible, but know what they're talking about and have the knowledge to understand that they're responsible for a lot of what the common fans think about what's going on in the sport. But instead of actually informing fans about what's going on in whatever sport they came to watch, ESPN is more of an entertainment show. It brings in guests that really don't know anything about the sport they're talking about, and it's just a shouting match between them and Stephen A. Smith that gives the fans entertainment and not real any knowledge on the sport. Because if you were an avid watcher of First Take this season, you would think that the Los Angeles Lakers and the Brooklyn Nets were running the entire NBA, because every single time you went on, the topic is either what Lakers game they lost the other day, what Russell Westbrook said, how good LeBron James playing, how bad he played, Kyrie Irving not want to play, James Harden not wanting to be on the Brooklyn Nets, etc., etc. Not actually what's going on in the NBA that's actually important. Because while First Take was too busy reporting on the bad teams with a pretty big name that bring the views, the good teams in the NBA that's been taking care of business and actually being something people would actually enjoy hearing about weren't getting any coverage at all. The Phoenix Suns this NBA season was walking through the entire NBA bit by bit, being one of the best teams in the entire league with the best record in the entire league. Yet on ESPN, if they ever got a headline, it would be a 30-second segment and then back to what you're talking about if LeBron James ate cereal that morning. The Miami Heat, on the Eastern Conference side of things, was a team that was riddled by injuries this entire year, yet they still found their way to being the first seed, winning games with extreme depth and great levels of play, yet you rarely ever saw them on a headline on ESPN. Nikola Jokic, one of the best players in the NBA, having one of the greatest offensive seasons of all time, was the MVP of this league, yet you rarely ever saw him on ESPN getting any coverage. If he ever did, it was most likely negative. While the show is hosted by one of the largest sports media members, and Stephen A. Smith is sometimes majority the culprit for it, so far recently, it's been one other person that's been getting on a lot of people's nerves. This is Christopher Russo, or Mad Dog Russo. Apparently, he's been an old head in the sports media game for a while. I've never heard of him until he came on the show, and I really wish I never did. Because Christopher Russo has had some not only asinine takes, but the way he goes about things give a little bit of this shut up and dribble crowd, if you get what I mean. Because if you want to be a lover of the game back then and you have a lot of the older players in your top 10 and not the newer ones, do what you want to if you want to be stupid. But right now, some of the takes he makes on here, and he argues and he just thinks getting louder than people is how you get your point across. And his dumbest take yet came recently when he said this.
All-time great,
You can't put.
He's absolutely an all-time
point guard.
He's an all-time great point guard.
Without
if
question.
he wins a championship, he's in the conversation for the greatest point guard ever. I'm not saying he's the
no, he's not. Greatest point guard. He's not Bob Cousy.
Hey pal, you just blowing from Stupid Town?
Now, I don't think I need to say a lot of why this take is stupid. I think JJ Redick did just a good enough job on telling you why it's stupid. But it's just the way he goes about things and the way he yells as if everything he says is fact and not really having any knowledge of what he's talking about at all. He doesn't give you stats, he doesn't give you deep analysis of anything. All he does is yell names, yell teams, and thinks that that is him being right. Now, of course, First Take isn't the only one that does this. Undisputed is a literal joke because if LeBron eats cereal in Dubai, that will be the topic next day. Colin Cowherd, you cannot convince me that he knows anything about basketball. Bill Simmons' podcast, you know what, I'll give Bill Simmons something. He sometimes is right, so I'm not even going to go on him. And I understand that if you're on these shows every single day and you have to come up with a topic to talk about every single day, you're going to have to sometimes make some shit up. Because you can't talk about the same thing every single day, especially when there's nothing new going on in the sports world. But the fact that you have no diverse topics at all and you just decide to spam the same thing over and over again and not give anybody else any coverage, or instead of actually being a good sports media show and giving people information, you just spam segments that nobody wants to talk about. Like, I don't care about what Mad Dog Russo top 5 teams of all time is. Every single one of these teams are in the 60s or 80s. Why would I care? But it's honestly becoming a large problem, and it's become a big disservice to the average fan that watches these shows to get involved on the sport. It's the reason why I love that these players are going on their own and actually getting their own ways to enter the media. JJ Redick, after he retires, has his own podcast, which is extremely large and extremely informative. He has actual NBA players that come on and actually talk about the sport. Kevin Durant, Draymond Green have their own podcast themselves that you can listen to them speak. And even the bigger YouTubers, from Legend of Winning to B Souls to Don2K, they're technically part of the sports media, and they've done a good job of informing the fans, giving you insightful things to think about certain times. And even if you don't disagree with them, you actually have conversations on the sport and what's actually going on, instead of sort of random topics that nobody cares about. So while I didn't know how I was going to end this video, really, I just really needed to talk about why the sports media has been extremely bad and has been doing a disservice to the community. And I'm glad that there's actual people that's slowly taking over and pushing these guys out the way that actually give good information and talk about the sport in ways that gives you good information about what's going around in the entire league, instead of spamming the same 2 topics over and over again. And whilst First Take as a show, Undisputed as a show, and a lot of these sports media continues to go up, so does the actual people that talk about the sport in a good light. So sooner or later, the fans will find the good people that talk about this stuff, like JJ Redick, like Kevin Durant himself, like Draymond Green, or find their way to YouTube and find the good podcasts and people that talk about the sport, like Kenny, like the Dom2Ks, like the Legend of Winnings. And when that day does come, it'll be a beautiful day for the sport. But with that being said, this FLB, I really didn't have much else to say other than a little bit of rant of why the sports media is pretty bad. But if you like this video, I may do stuff like this again. But most of my other content is pretty scripted, talking about certain teams, why they're good, and stuff like that. But if you enjoy that type of content, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. But with that being said, this FLB, that's my time, and I'm out.